welcome everybody to a Plexus pop-up. And we are so excited to have Cat Lyons, who's participated in a number of programs, and she has been developing this really interesting work on the food for thought and thought for food, but really the relationship we have with food and complexity thinking. And part of what's exciting about all of the Plexus pop-ups is that as soon as somebody says, I've been working on this new theory, or I've been thinking about something, I'd like to be able to share it with the network, then all of a sudden a lot of other connections occur. And we've been working on a number of projects that really talk about humans' relationship to food in bigger ecosystems. And so this is just going to add to those emerging conversations. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kat. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you to Plexus. So I'm Kat. I'm a culinary nutrition coach. I'm an RN by training, although I pretty much have an aversion to Western medicine. And I've always been interested in food. Had an Italian mother. And one of the things I'm interested in doing is setting up a food philosophy course. And so I'm looking for your input. Personally, I love food, and I love all food things related. And I love to cook, although I realize that not everyone does. And I've also noticed, especially when I really start paying attention to the effect that food has on my life and the life of others, and on our well-being or our lack of well-being. So when I think about all the factors and the influences and the judgments and the emotions that are about food and around food, it really is complex. And I'm deciphering my relationship with food when I think about these things. And I'm thinking about what I think and I feel and I believe about how the food fits in my life. That's my food philosophy. That's what my food philosophy is. It's all about my relationship to food. And we all have a food philosophy in a sense, because we all have a relationship to food. I mean, whether we like it or not, we all have to eat to survive. So whether your food, people have looked at me funny, what, food philosophy? Well, yeah, and then maybe our food philosophy or your food philosophy is going to be that I don't want to pay attention to this. I have 8 million other things in my life, and I don't want to be bothered with this. So I guess that could be your food philosophy, or you could want to spend more time examining the complexity of it and why food is the way it is in your life. And you can spend some time looking at details, and there are lots of different details to look at. And what amazes me is that when you start to pay attention to something, things come and you learn things that, I've learned things I had no idea about, especially in our modern life with the way food is. There are a lot of things we don't have to think about because we're not hunter-gatherers anymore. So not many of us spend really any time thinking about where our food really comes from. So there even, and then how many of us sit down and really think of it in terms of ecosystems, when we're starving and we, stand in front of our fridge wanting to pull something out. So whether you want to think about, eggs, for example, and if they actually, like a vegan would say they putrefy in the gut and they're really not any good for you at all, or somebody who follows a paleo diet and thinks they're one of the best foods we can eat, that's all the kind of stuff that goes into examining our food philosophy. So what I'd like to do is to spend maybe 8 minutes or so, or more if we need, each taking some time to stop and think about our relationship to food. Because we all make decisions about food every day. And in the course of a day, we make more than one decision about food, probably. So it's really stopping to think about how and why we eat what we eat. So you can write it out, you can draw it out, if we want to be more visual, and then we can pick up from that. So I guess I should have said we were going to need pen and paper, which I didn't say. So yeah, and what you're seeing is part of what's on my website under food philosophy. And that just basically it outlines your beliefs and ideas about food and how it fits into our life. And maybe someone will help me mind the time. Okay, awesome.
I can do time.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
About a minute left in the time.
Are we good time-wise?
Anyone need more?
Do we need more time or we're good?
I think we're good.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I would really love input. So if we could share, maybe you could say your name and maybe your location where you're at, a little bit about yourself, and then what you've come up with, what came to you about your relationship to food and your food philosophy, and maybe even what your favorite food is.
Mm.
So, or one of them. Who wants to share?
Okay, I'll go. My name is Heather Haynes, and I am in Long Island, New York. And a little bit about myself. I am an outdoor educator and do a lot of work. I'm outside of my house, so I'm not always home. And that's something I think that is applicable to my food philosophy, because sometimes my choices are limited or not as limited, but it would take more effort and energy for me to kind of think about what my food needs and priorities are. But yeah, what I was thinking was a lot of things in terms of food philosophy, and wanting to, in an ideal world, wanting to eat healthy and not too much, and notice a lot of things about myself. And like when I'm tired, I'm really out of whack. And by the way, if you see this is my cat Pippi. So that's another aspect. But I notice that when I'm tired, I feel really out of whack, and I have a lot less patience for food, and I just want something easy instead of being like let's cook a full out meal. And that's something I've noticed. And the other things that I've thought about are just a wide range of environmental concerns, like the impact of our growing practices and how my food choices matter in that realm, as well as the economic impact of the cost of food to me, but then also in the larger global practices as well. And in my personal world, I'm trying to eat less meat. is something that's just kind of currently going on for me for a variety of reasons. And, struggles are, processed food is so good. And I think like trying to find that balance of, the emotional impact of food, I think can be really strong for me as well. I can definitely eat more emotionally than rationally and than what I really need. And trying to, how I think about food kind of came up for me, because I think if I think first about it as a fuel, like it's something that I need to be able to do the other things I want in my life. But then like also balancing the importance of it tasting good and being good for me. And kind of asking more questions of like, what do I need to eat as opposed to what I want to eat? And what is, yeah, what's best for my body right now. Those are the random thoughts that came up for me in the last 8 minutes.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Not necessarily coherent, but but out there.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, you raised some, great points, interesting things, and yeah, especially the emotional impact of food. So, yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Who would like to share next? Barb?
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about food for a good 22 years because my son was born allergic to corn. And if you think you can find corn syrup-free things now, or that it's hard to find, you can imagine 22 years ago, it was almost impossible to feed him without going back to everything had to be it's extraordinary that Vlasic pickles, there was the uncut Vlasic pickles that were okay, and the sliced Vlasic pickles have corn syrup. So I have been reading every single can that or anything that enters the house for 22 years, and it's gotten me a lot thinking about why is corn so endemic in our food, and it's because of all the corn subsidies. It's in Europe, you can get all kinds of things. I mean, very little in Europe has corn in it. So there's that. It's a food is political from the get-go. And over the last 22 years, I've noticed that there are more farmers markets. And somebody recently said, should I buy organic? And I said, well, whether it's good for you or not good for you, you're making a choice and building a food system on your economic choices. Do you want to, organic might be coming from Mexico, but if you buy from the farmer's market, it might not be organic, but it's local. So recently, my farmer's market, it's one farmer that I've been buying from for a long time. I noticed that he has set up a hydroponic system for growing lettuce, which really irritates me because the only nutrients then in the lettuce are the nutrients that they put into whatever water they've got. And so I view the hydroponic lettuce as kind of pointless. And yet, it is local. But that also then got me thinking about the ecology of soil. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but Europeans generally are taller than Americans. And it's because our soil is so extraordinarily depleted because we keep growing the same thing over and over again in the same patch of soil. So there's nothing there for us. And so, ultimately, whatever you cook or buy or whatever, it's a political statement. And I started feeling this irritation about, the family politics of, because of my son's allergies, he sort of has to eat paleo. He's allergic to pretty much all grains. And I find that irritating because I don't think I would choose to eat the way that he has to eat. But then as Heather was talking, I've been resenting how that forces me into things that I don't want to do. But then I realized that as the major cook in the family, which, you know, is a whole feminist political statement, is that I have power that I don't think I have utilized. And I'm going to think about how I can utilize it.
Awesome. Thanks, Barb. Yeah, just brings out more factors, more facets, more roads to different connections with things that we would never, ever, that I think most Americans don't ever think of, don't ever stop to think of. And I just think, what would happen if this were brought to awareness with more people? And it's interesting because when you speak of the corn issues, I remember reading in one of Michael Pollan's books, you know, people always relate corn to Mexico and talk about Mexicans being corn people. Well, anyway, and what he said is when they've done studies where they've analyzed cells and things under microscopes, that we have so much corn in us, we are like walking corn sticks. And that's because, as Barb said, it is in everything. And how many of us are aware of that? So thanks, Barb. That was just fascinating. So who else would like to share? Denise. You're muted, though.
Yes, thank you. And I will then also spotlight my video. There I am. Hi. It's so interesting to me as I was thinking about this. I had to draw a picture. So every time I draw a picture, I show everybody. And as I was drawing this picture, it occurred that food to me is very much an external relationship. So I love to cook. I love to feed people. I love to shop. I love to look at things. I love to grow food. But whenever I think about food, it's about everybody else, not about myself. It's always externalized, which is sort of an interesting thing. It defines how I interact with others. So I prefer to cook than go to a restaurant because I'm not sure exactly what they're making, and I think that sometimes it's sort of egregious that there's a lot of sauces on things, so you don't really understand the underlying factors of what the food is. And consequently, people will always say, oh, she doesn't want to go out anywhere because she doesn't like how other people cook. And I realize that it is a very complex sense of having control over the food and making sure that it is reflective. As I was writing this, it's reflective of how I relate to other people. And so as Heather was speaking and Barb was speaking, I thought, sometimes what I prefer to do is have, a piece of fruit and that's it. I can go an entire day or 2 days without even eating, but I will always be cooking. I am making things and bringing things to neighbors, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the nourishment of my body. That's a very personal thing. So I was like, wow. So thank you, Kat, for even making me think about that. I had never thought about it that way before.
Awesome. Thanks, Denise, for sharing that. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Next, who wants to share?
I can go next. This is Joe. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Joe down here in South Jersey at the moment, looking for a signal. But I think I got one. It's pretty good right now.
Awesome.
So, yeah, for me, it's some of these things are themes that have already been mentioned. I want to enjoy what I'm eating, and that certainly has an emotional piece to it. And I got in the habit of thinking about how I'm going to feel 30 minutes or an hour or 90 minutes after I eat, as a second piece of the philosophy here. So that, it's got to taste really good for me to sacrifice how I'm going to feel in an hour or whatever. but I've been known to do that. But again, so that's part of the weighing in of like into okay, what I choose to eat. And feeling good, of course, has to do, I think, is well connected with fuel, as was mentioned. Here's a real quirky one. Speaking to the ecological piece, and while there is the question of, well, gee, this I can go with this item or this other one over here, and one's local, one comes from like New Zealand or something. Okay, that's part of it. The other one that I see growing neurosis on is how much garbage is going to be created by what I eat. If I'm out and I can there's like two different items I want. One of them is in this plastic container. The other is wrapped in paper. I'll actually make like the final call. May come from paper. Paper's not as nasty. I'm gonna go paper. Whatever it's wrapped in, I'm gonna go with that. And then another convenience. I when I'm particularly when I'm working and I'm running about, keep my eye out for like where to eat, and doing that. It's convenience thing. Gee, I'm not gonna be able to think straight if I don't get something in me. So sometimes I'll sacrifice some of those above pieces because of it. And then social is a piece. Are there times when I'll eat something that's there because there's other folks around and they're going there. I mean, last week I was with a bunch of folks, and they was working away from home, and so the crowd was going to a steakhouse, and I don't eat meat. I don't eat steak. So, I'll go there. I'm not going to chow down on a steak, but nonetheless, it wasn't the food there wasn't the kind I would have chosen. What strikes me about our modern life and the way science and just ourselves culturally, we have explored food. You now have a food channel, and different aspects of. And what used to be, I'm hungry, let's go kill us a wolf, and then we'll live for quite a while on that, and then move on. And my sense is that philosophy is something like a philosophy is required, necessary, because of the dizzying influences we have on us. Again, the reason for this conversation here. And so with the dizzying choices we have, and there's others that I haven't even gone into, of course, aspects of it. The political was mentioned. That's an important one. It seems like we really do need to come up with some kind of framework to sort of manage the complexity of this, and then that there's a balancing required here between the flow of life and just living a life, and in a framework, and trying to avoid perseveration. And if you don't have a philosophy, if you don't have a framework for this kind of stuff, then it seems to me that unless you're just totally on the other end, is like, hey, whatever tastes good, whatever's in front of me, I'm just going to eat it. I mean, you can go to that. That's philosophy. You could, if you don't do that, then you're going to have to come up with a way to make your decisions. And I think more conversations like this are in order to help everybody. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very insightful. Thank you. Who wants to share next? Amanda and Connie, I think we have left.
Here. Okay. My turn?
Sure. Hi, Connie. Thanks.
Hi. I'm just fascinated by the diversity of perspectives we have on this. It's so great. I've enjoyed everybody's comments. And I guess I bring another perspective into this because I grew up on a farm in Illinois. So, I was out growing my in the garden, and I was the oldest of 3 girls, so I am a farmer. Like, I know all about cultivating and planting and harvesting and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going to bed when you can't hardly see. So then I ended up just across the border in Canada in Thunder Bay, working at the university there. And I lived in town for about 2 years and I couldn't take it. I had to get back to the land.
Wow.
So I grow all of my food. And I try very hard not to eat even any fruits from the store, except bananas. And of course, I'm a coffee nut, so I have to have my coffee, which I try to buy organic. But other than that, I eat the fruits that are here. So we're lucky to have blueberries and Saskatoons and choke cherries and strawberries and things like that. So, and all my vegetables, I put everything away for the family I freeze everything or can it or make jelly or whatever out of it. So as I am working in the garden, I always kind of smile to myself sometimes, because I think that all of life and our relationship with people is really in that garden. And it teaches us a lot about balance and the importance of not too much of this or not too much of that. You don't want too much nitrogen, you don't want too much potassium, also of the diversity of the micronutrients that you need, but if you can't have too many. I used to follow a more traditional, classic, every weed has to go. And because that's what I grew up with. So my father used to go up to the second floor of our story farmhouse, and he would take pictures of how well I did at cultivating that corn and soybeans. And if I didn't do it right, we were out there with a hoe cleaning it up. So I grew up with this incredibly immaculate sense of order. And since then, over the years, I've learned of the importance of balance as opposed to order. And this has had a profound impact on me. And I do see all of the basic principles of complexity in growing food. And I don't have time right now to do this. Another idea that I think it keeps me very close to the feedback of nature. I'm constantly aware. First thing I do in the morning is look out the window and see what's going on. And I realized when I was in university that it was a very strange thing to do compared to all my other students on my floor in the dorm who were mostly from Chicago. And like looking out the window to see what was going on was very strange to them. But nature dictates what I do for the day. And so this morning before we got on this call, I'm running outside because it's the warmest day this week and making sure changing all the water for the chickens and doing all these things that I can actually do without having to put gloves on. So it felt good. Yeah. And I'm very intrigued on a totally another topic. I'm very intrigued by this ongoing revolution or insights into gut bacteria. And I've read some, but I know we all are trying. I think even the researchers in this area are still trying to figure all this out. But I think it has a place in our relationship with food. So I just bring that up as a topic, Catherine, for a course on food philosophy.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be in there. Yeah. So I could go on and on and on, but I just thank you for this topic. I guess the other thing I should say is I am involved very deeply in my community of Thunder Bay in increasing local food into our food system. So, and that's a zillion other stories. But yeah, but I interested in this food philosophy. I never thought about it as a course before, but you know, it makes me think that if you go back to some of the earlier classic philosophers like Locke, Locke would have said we were godlike and good when we cultivated or hewed away all of the trees, right? We had to clean things up. We had to clean up the clutter. And I remember when I took a philosophy course, there are some classic quotes from John Locke, about how in order to be godlike, man must, cultivate the land, like take control of the land, not live with the land. And so, I don't know, you might want to think about that in your course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's so many different facets. And so many different pieces of it. It is so complex. Thanks, Connie, for bringing all that up. And yeah, definitely the microbiome, and I mean the whole health issues and all the things health related about food. That's huge in and of itself. So there's so many different arms to all of this. Thanks for all your input. Awesome. Okay, so Amanda, I think, is left for sharing.
Sweet. Sure. So food. Yeah. So I have gone through so I'm currently in Brooklyn, New York at the moment, and I have gone through lots of different philosophies. I think for me, it's sort of a living and breathing thing, hasn't been sort of one for life. But these days I tend to eat to feel alive, and thinking about how will I feel, and will this food make me feel more alive and help me thrive? And sometimes that might be based on its nutrient value, and sometimes that might be based on, there's a whole slew of people together and there's a chocolate cake. So that's going to happen. And allowing for that flexibility rather than following rigid guidelines has been something that I've been coming to more lately. And what else did I write here? Focusing on vegetables and variety. I tend to eat vegetarian and love supporting farmers and eating organic and local whenever I can. And also have felt the intense inherent contradictions in trying to figure out which way to go with that. And a couple folks have mentioned the different from environmental to a lot of other, factors in this. And ultimately to have fun in the kitchen for me. I love hosting people, and I love bringing people together around food. And I think food can almost help us create a container in which people can connect. And so to me, as sort of my inherent facilitatorness, that is a big, humongous thing. So all of my workshops tend to have really good food, and I'm always hosting dinner parties. So if anybody's ever in Brooklyn, invite to the Plexus community to eat together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're echoing, part of that is what Michael Pollan talked about, the dinner table as the hallmark of civilized society. And yeah, so that's another thing, the social connections that it brings. Yeah, so important. All right, thanks. I think we got everyone, right? Did I skip anyone? I think we all shared. Okay, cool. Okay, I guess what I would love, oh, well, I guess I could share mine. If, can you put it on the screen? Yeah, this is just some of the things I had written. This is what's on my website. And it's, you know, basically, again, you know, hitting out to all the things that we've talked about with maybe a few more specifics in there that were in my brain at that time. Yeah, so there's, you know, social, political, economic, of course, you know, pleasure, taste, you know, the fact that what we put in our mouth powers our cells, and, you know, its whole relationship to what we are and how we live. So, yeah. Okay, so what I would love to hear from you is what you thought of doing this exercise, and what you thought about sitting down and actually taking a few minutes to look at this. You know, how did it make you feel? Was it worthwhile? So tell me, I'd love to know.
I think it was worthwhile, because I think it, as you were saying, like, it is something that's such a big part of our everyday existence. But how much do we stop and take that minute to think about it, and really reflect on what it means for us on an individual basis? And I think so fantastic to hear so many other people's perspectives and views, because it made me think about different things that I hadn't thought of as well. Yeah, and I think, like, we get into this like wheel of, we just go, and it just stopping and taking a minute is really important.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I mean, I'm really struck with the wonderful contrast between the farm view, and certainly mine, and some of us out there, and of course, what you have going for you in the farm view is eons of life and tradition and ways in that. And you know, I generally have a bias for, you know, some of that that more historic traditional stuff, because I think there's a reason why it sustains over time. Not that we don't like a little something new every now and then, but we can have too much new. So I guess I'm, you know, as I think about complexity, I think about these conversations. You know, talk about having grist for the mill. Isn't that appropriate there? Huh?
Another food phrase, yeah.
There you go. There you go. I'm so clever. For you know, how can you know, complexity science help me out here? Help each of us out here. I mean, geez, there's only like 7 of us here, and we sort of collectively threw out a whole bunch of stuff. And so, is there anything in the complexity science that would have that would sort of help me with the balancing act? If I well, yeah, the balancing act based upon what I described. And actually, I mean, I didn't speak to all the influences, and the influences you folks mentioned. I also share a number of those as well. So, you know, my question is, as we, you know, I mean, we've all thought a fair amount about this. So, are there things we can do to better organize that thinking? I guess that's where I come out with, and I guess that's more of a question than any kind of a comment or solution.
Okay, awesome.
I want to thank the Lyons family for the thinking about how does the food affect me personally, what I realized is that I am like Denise in that it's always about the other and the caretaking, and that I've forgotten that it's also about me. And so that was a very helpful thing to hear everybody else talking.
Thanks.
I'm going to jump in and echo what Barb just said. I am deeply, deeply aware now of how each of you took ownership of it in a very personal and I think very inclusive way. And so it has, so I'm thinking now, even though food seems to dominate everything I do, but I think I need to be more articulate with myself on how are my actions related to maybe a deeper philosophy that doesn't necessarily even have to do with food, but has to do with my sense of how I move through different systems and in the world. So thank you. This is really absolutely intriguing and I love it. So yes, we need to have a course, Kat.
Yeah, that's, right. And that's, I would love your help and the input to figure out what's, well, just there's so many different things in terms of presenting it. So what's going to bring value to it for people?
I just thought of something when Barb was speaking. It caused me to think about this piece, and we had a mention of the microbiome and all that, and I started thinking of the behavioral piece in food. There's that great Snickers commercial about if you're grumpy, and they show somebody really grumpy, and you get a Snickers, and there's something to that, and I think researchers are going to find out with greater precision the connection between our eating and our behavior, and this notion of what I don't know. I mean, I'm not clinically competent here, but I've heard things. There's a term I heard from way back called the blood-brain barrier or something about in the sense that the brain is somewhat self-contained and isn't so much affected by the body, and yet the more recent neuroscience, if I have any clue about it at all, which I could be off, but is that that we really have a unity going on here, body mind, and that so our you have the social in I'm going to prepare food for people, and I'm going to create a space for people to enjoy themselves with really good food, and that's one of it. And the other is, well, I'm going to eat well, because if I don't, I'm going to be I'm going to be more likely to be curt or not so nice to other people, because it's going to affect me in an adverse way emotionally, and so I'm going to sort of do a little tearing of the social fabric around me. So yet one more complexity. So yeah, we got work to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Interesting. Yeah. Who else? Amanda?
Sure. Yeah, I love it. I think the more that I can spend time thinking about this, and so I mean, basically, I have a lot of inner conflict around food too, and I've stepped into spaces where oh, this is good or this is bad, and that kind of thinking comes, and I think it's from a whole ton of different influences, and yet, as we know when we talk complexity, it's not a dichotomy, and it's not only one or the other, it's way more than that. And so figuring out how to think about it and how to attach that thinking to how I feel about it would be really helpful in every day, the 3 or 5 or 7 times a day that I eat. Right. And sort of helping to make those decisions, whether it's actual meal planning. And so maybe the food philosophy is this kernel, it's a seed in it. And what's sort of coming from it is that it is sort of a core thing. Denise talked about how personal it is in many ways. And it kind of steps down and takes us to acknowledge our actual humanity. And so once we've stepped into there, then we can step a little bit into our behavior and start thinking, okay, as a human in my role and how I interact, how do I want to, yada, yada, yada. Yeah,
Awesome.
I love it. I could talk and draw food all day long. So
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, hopefully one of the benefits of this is things coming to our awareness that maybe we, the kind of things like, but somehow don't pay attention to, or somehow it isn't highlighted. Yeah, thank you. Connie, would you like to add? Anything?
Sorry, I started talking without the mute on.
Oh, that's
I just have immensely enjoyed all the diversity of perspectives. And it reminds me that food in and of itself is a complex system.
yeah.
And, if we just took the basic definition of complex system and said that it's all independent pieces, we're all very independent, right? And we are very unpredictable in our independence, but yet everything we say has a huge influence on how we evolve to understand food. And I loved it because we can all get into our own little, as Denise said, we kind of interpreted food from our own perspective, which I think is what you asked for. Right. And yet it enriches all of us. So it is being a complex system that in the end enriches us. So we're all very diverse and we're all independent, but we've changed each other today. And that's good. So thank you. I just wish we had more time to spend together.
Oh, thanks, Connie. Thank you. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Questions for each other at this point? Okay.
I would like to acknowledge two things. One, it's a real talent and a great gift for you to hold the space the way you did, Kat. And this, to start out with a fairly broad question, and then to very quickly create the space, and then also sort of the feedback to let each of us go into some very detailed and thought-provoking approaches to food. And yes, to echo Connie, I wish we had lots more time together, which means yes, we do have to do a course. So I am really throwing that out there again. But also, it's just an important topic because it is the one thing that we share is food. And as we spend lots of other time on a number of other issues, and bigger and broader social and technological perspectives, we tend to forget what's at the absolute core that makes us complex adaptive systems and humans. And this is a really important conversation. And so I want to thank you very much. I want to thank everybody else for sharing so openly as well. So I am going to mute myself, and then Kat, just have you sort of conclude, and then I will stop the recording.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much. This was very helpful. I get a little overwhelmed when I read stuff and look at stuff and try to put this together because it is complex. So it's very wonderful to have help with, with the voices I hear, because I want it to be of value to people if I'm going to do this. So thank you for all the perspectives. And please feel free to get in touch with me if you'd like to add something, or if you have more light bulbs go off for ways that this would go or how this would work. So you can always find me at mindyourfork.com. So, thank you very much. And thank you to Plexus.